Hey guys, Matt here. This is my review of Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, or Fantastic Beasts 2. This movie is directed by David Yates, who did the first Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them film, the final 4 Harry Potter movies, and Tarzan. This movie stars Eddie Redmayne, Catherine Waterston, and Dan Fogel, with Zoe Kravitz, Ezra Miller, Johnny Depp, and Jude Law. Fantastic Beasts 2 picks up 6 months after the events of the first film. The year is now 1927, and the big bad villain, Gellert Grindelwald, played by Johnny Depp, has escaped custody. So the Ministry of Magic tasks Newt Scamander, played by Eddie Redmayne, with finding Credence Barebone, played by Ezra Miller, and Grindelwald. So now Newt and his friends must stop one potential threat and locate another. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I thought it was a little messy because you had the fantastical part with the beasts and the creatures, but then you had this dark side of the film that they threw in there to kind of balance it. So, having seen the previews for this new movie, I got excited because one, we were going to see more of Grindelwald, we were going to see backstories, and it was going to be a lot darker. And it was going to be serious, and it was going to be focused. Well, I was right on some of that. Alright, here's the basic breakdown of the film. The movie introduces Grindelwald. He's a badass character. It's a really cool introduction. And then they show Newt, and a love interest, and Newt's brother. He's got to go find Credence. Goes back to Grindelwald. Him and his lackeys also need to go find Credence. Then Dumbledore finds Newt and says, guess what? Watch out for Grindelwald, but go find Credence. Then they introduce some third-party characters who are also looking for Credence. And then it shows Credence, and he's trying to figure out who he is, what his backstory is, and who his birth parents are. Now, this movie does a good job of tying in the theme of a mystery, just like the other Harry Potter films. The first one, The Philosopher's Stone and what it could do. The second film, What's in the Chamber. The third film, Who is the Prisoner of Azkaban, etc., etc. But when they finally reveal why Credence is so important and his backstory, it's an overload of information, and it's very confusing. Now let me start off with the positives in this movie. Eddie Redmayne is fine as Newt Scamander. His character is now becoming kind of one note. He's a shy Hufflepuff who eventually will step up to be the hero or the leader that him and his friends need him to be. Also, Johnny Depp as Grindelwald, very, very good. Jude Law as Dumbledore, also really good. They're not in the film as much as I would have liked, but they do become these characters. Jude Law does a really good job of getting down the mannerisms and the speech patterns of Michael Gambon's Dumbledore and Richard Harris. Much like Ewan McGregor did for young Obi-Wan, where Jude Law will point out strengths in a character. He will tell someone what their options are in life, like what they could do, and then how they are, just like Dumbledore did with Harry, and I really like that. And Johnny Depp as Grindelwald, also really good. He's this very persuasive, evil, slimy character, and he plays that role very well. The really cool scenes with him are at the very beginning of the movie and the very end of the movie that make him a threat. And I've got to say, in the flashback scenes, it's really nice to see Hogwarts again because just like Fantastic Beasts and in this movie, they do take place in different locations, but you don't really get to appreciate this city or the countries that they're in. They go to France. They have the Eiffel Tower in the background, but they don't show you the beauty. They don't show you the elegance that is France. You don't get to appreciate the locations. They're just in another city or another foggy London, or they're just there. They don't really show you the city, more or less just a simple setting. Also, the flashbacks really shine some light on the characters, and I did appreciate that to an extent. They do a lot of flashbacks. The ones regarding Hogwarts and Leta Lestrange and Dumbledore and Newt, those I appreciated. The ones that come later in the film in the third act, not so much. Now, This is a sequel to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. But the only real indicator that this is a sequel is by them bringing back characters like Tina, played by Catherine Waterston, Jacob, played by Dan Fogel, and Queenie. But because it's been 6 months, the characters aren't the same from when they left off in the last movie. You have that awkward moment between Tina and Newt because it's been so long since they've seen each other. You have a really, really, really stupid reason for bringing back Jacob. And even though it's nice to see Jacob and Queenie interact and their chemistry was cute in the first film, this one, there's really nothing there. The only time I felt anything for those two characters is in the end of the movie. And there's a dramatic scene, but that's really the only reason why any of the love interests have been introduced to this movie, is to create a dramatic scene. Another problem with this movie is universe building, world building. Too many films nowadays are trying to make their movie part of a bigger universe, when they should be focusing on a central story and making that strong. They try to plant seeds for stuff, and they try to make everything expand and spread out to stuff that we're familiar with. And that's why a lot of franchises that focus around fantasy or sci-fi, like The Hobbit or the Star Wars prequels, they fail. Because they try to connect the dots too much. Instead of making a standalone movie really good on its own, they have to remind you, hey, you know what comes later, so here's a little glimpse of what's to come. Or here's something that you'll have to pay attention to because it's going to become something later on. And that's what they did here in this movie. This film felt more of an origin story, like a first film in a franchise, as opposed to a sequel. And yes, they have characters and names and references and spells and stuff like that we'll see later on in the Harry Potter film, which some are nice to see because you get to see the origins of things, but then other little threads they singe off. Literally. There was also a stark similarity between this film regarding Dumbledore and Grindelwald, like Professor X and Magneto. This film is a lot like X-Men First Class, where you have characters and you have an idea of where they're going to go in the future, but considering this franchise is supposed to be 5 films, I'm not quite sure what direction they're going to go. And if you were like me and got excited after seeing the trailers and the posters and the title screen and saw all the little references to the Deathly Hallows, guess what? There are 0 mentions of any of them in the entire film. Aside from the fact that Grindelwald uses the Elder Wand, not a single character mentions any of it. So you might be asking yourself, hey Matt, you said there are a lot of characters in this movie. How many of them are integral to the story or important? Let me show you. This is a promotional item for Fantastic Beasts. There are 16 characters on this cup. 4 of them are important to the story. That means you could have eliminated 12 other characters and 30 to 45 minutes of screen time. But unfortunately, this movie was dragged out and oversaturated. Now, whenever there's a Harry Potter marathon on, usually I tend to watch all of them, except for 2, only because I've seen them a couple times and they're just not my favorite. But now, after seeing Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, this is now my least favorite Harry Potter film. And I hate saying that because I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter. But this movie was so disappointing. It was boring, slow, messy, and oversaturated. Granted, it did start planting the seeds for things that are to come, but this movie felt like the first movie in a series and not a sequel as it should have. So because of that, I'm going to give Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald a C-. There's no magic or spell that can save this one. So until next time, guys, see ya.